Good morning. Good morning. A warm welcome to you all at the Land and Carbon Lab Summit, which is co-hosted by the World Resources Institute, the Norway International Climate and Forest Initiative, and the Bezos Earth Fund. And before we start, can I please remind you that you can use your headphones if you want to use the translation on site. My name is Stientje van Veldhoven. I am Vice President at the World Resource Institute, and I'm also the Regional Director for Europe, so it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today. This is the very first official Land and Carbon Lab Summit, but of course it builds on the success of the Global Forest Watch Summit in 2019 and the previous very successful GFW partnership meetings. And you have come to Brussels from all over the world. There's 650 people in this room, coming from 62 countries around the world. And we have about 6,000 people that have registered for following this session online. So a very, very warm welcome to all of you here. And why are we here? We are here because we care. We care about protecting the planet and its national resources. And we know that we have to reconcile competing land demands with combating climate change, protecting biodiversity, and creating space for people. People, climate, and nature are at the heart of everything that we do. And we need monitoring tools for land use, and we need to put the data into the hands of the people who can actually make the change. And so, it's also not really a coincidence that you're here in Brussels, in the European capital of legislation. Only a couple of miles away from here, legislation is being made that affects Europe as a whole, and that can also affect the world as a whole. Going into effect this year is the EU deforestation regulation, promoting the consumption of deforestation-free products, one of the first pieces of legislation of this kind in the world, and I must say, I hope that many more will follow. And we will have a session. Yes, a bit of an applause there. I could certainly say, let's do that. There will be a specific session on this tomorrow on day 2. But of course, legislation, that's only one piece of the puzzle. Countries also very much need the capacity to be able to comply with this regulation. We need to make sure that we enable the producing countries to access that market and to create those benefits for people, climate, and nature. We need instruments to monitor progress, and that will be the key in the coming 3 days. It's going to be divided over 8 tracks. We'll be discussing cutting-edge monitoring tools, ranging from landscape restoration, fighting deforestation and nature crimes, conversion-free supply chains, and sustainable land use for food and urban planning. But before we get to that, I'm very pleased to introduce our very first speaker of today, Dr. Andrew Steer, President and CEO from the Bezos Earth Fund. But of course, we also know Andrew because he's led WRI for about 8 years. And during those years, he made WRI grow, increased its presence, increased its impact, and that is what Andrew is really passionate about. Before joining WRI, of course, he had a long-standing career at the World Bank, and he's written many fantastic reports that still have a lot of impacts today. But I think the impact that Andrew has most is how he knows to take people on a journey, towards ambition, to take people on a journey showing that we can create change if we work together. So Andrew, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stientje, and welcome everybody. My goodness me. Welcome to the conference of 100 trillion data points that is going to change the world. It's going to make the world greener. It's going to make the world healthier, and it's going to make the world more just. In this room today, and the thousands that are online, we have some of the best scientists in the world. We have some of the most knowledgeable nature experts in the world. We have decision makers from 60 countries that are making tough decisions that will be based upon the data we're discussing today. We have the world's greatest technology companies. We have donors and bilateral supporters of this great enterprise. Each one of us individually has a lot to offer, but combined, it is going to be quite magical. And as one looks at the schedule that we have ahead of us, it could not be more thrilling. So welcome, it is great to be here. Just 3 days ago, we were in Paris for the financial summit that President Macron had called. And he asked a few of us to go and meet with him in the Élysée Palace to talk about forests. And he was saying that, my goodness me, we've got new data coming out. And by the way, it's going to be announced this afternoon here in this building. It doesn't look so good. How do we ramp up support for the forest agenda? And the first thing I said is we need to know what's going on. And because of the kind of people we have in this room, because of Land and Carbon Lab and the Global Forest Watch, we actually now know. So every decision maker can know exactly what is going on, so there is no excuse. So here at the Bezos Earth Fund, we're working right now with the World Resource Institute and others to track and monitor and hold accountable the promises that were made at COP26 in Glasgow. Move towards zero deforestation by 2030. Who's on track? Who's missing it? We can now know. I remember I used to live in Indonesia, and when I talked to the then President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and told him about Global Forest Watch, he said, for the first time ever, I will know whether my policies are actually bearing fruit in central Kalimantan. So we live in an incredibly exciting world. Let me tell you why the Bezos Earth Fund is so enthusiastic about this project and why we allocated $50 million to support Land and Carbon Lab. Well, I'll give you one example. We've made a commitment of $3 billion to support nature, $1 billion to conserve what we still have, $1 billion to restore what we've lost, and $1 billion to transform food systems, without which we won't be able to conserve or restore. We can't do any of those three things unless we have the data and knowledge embedded in the Land and Carbon Lab. So of all of our conservation in the Congo Basin, and we have dozens of grants there and in Latin America and elsewhere, every single one of them is being monitored by Land and Carbon Lab. And so too on the restoration agenda right here and now, together with WRI and the African Union and various NGOs that are in this room, we're supporting about 1,500 projects right now. Every single one of those is to be monitored by Land and Carbon Lab. Terribly exciting. We're learning as we're going. We use the satellites, but then we also do all kinds of drone technology and so on. So we're in a position that we never could have been in before. And this builds trust, because a lot of financiers aren't willing to invest unless they really know what's happening. So that's very exciting. And so too on the food side of things, we're investing in addressing the second most polluting species on the planet. We're number one, by the way. Cattle, number two. How they graze makes all the difference. And now with Pasture Watch, we can actually monitor what's happening. And through new technologies, we can steer the cattle, even in the Brazilian or Colombian grasslands, to better places. That's just one of 100 examples we could mention. Just finally, Land and Carbon Lab is not a static data platform. It is a dynamic, learning, innovative platform. I was walking along this morning to come here with Sean DeWitt, who leads the restoration group at WRI. And I was saying, what's new? He said, let me give you one example. I could give you many. He said, in my team, John Brandt is now using a technology using artificial intelligence that originally came from Tesla, and then brain scientists decided to use it. It was originally for automatic driving. Brain scientists decided to use it to track cancer cells in brains. And then they had the idea, if they could track very hard to find cancer cells, maybe it could also track trees that are in open agriculture, which is a very knotty problem. So now that's happening, and it's a breakthrough. And that's just one of 100 that some people in this room will be thinking about today. So look, what a joy it is to be here. One final point. Data in and of its own will not solve the problem, and technological advances have usually led to more inequity. I'm just reading a great book called Power and Progress by Acemoglu and Johnson. And it basically looks at 1,000 years of technological progress. And it asks which of these technological progress breakthroughs made the world a fairer place and which made it a more unequal place. Mostly, it makes the world a more unequal place. And one of the reasons we love Land and Carbon Lab so much is that there's an absolutely ruthless, rigorous focus on making sure that the right people have the data. One small example we're involved in, we've just provided a grant of $9 million to work with indigenous people in the Amazon because so far they have been totally excluded from carbon markets. So the benefits of carbon markets financially all go to other people, not to indigenous people. It's important that they have the best lawyers, the best analysts, but it's also essential they have the best data. And that's where Land and Carbon Lab, and that's why we're using it to, if you like, shift the balance. So welcome, everybody. It is a great, great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I think if there's one thing that Andrew says to all of us, and I think you just illustrated this again, Andrew, it's we have to think bigger. We have to think more out of the box. We have to combine more forces. We can make more happen. And we're definitely all going to talk about that during these 3 days. Thank you so much for being with us here. It's my great pleasure now, too, to announce the next speaker, which is Andreas Dahl Jørgensen. And he's the director of the Norway International Climate and Forest Initiative, and also Deputy Director General of the Norway Ministry of Climate and Environment. But he's not just worked in government. He's also really experienced what it is to be in a developing country and to work your way through this transition that we all have to go through, as he was also head of finance of an Indian startup in renewable energies. We're very, very excited to hear from you. It's a long-standing partner of WRI. Please give your warm welcome. The floor is yours. Andreas.
Thank you very much, Tintje, and thank you for putting me after Andrew. And by the way, thank you, Andrew, for everything you've done. We have been greatly appreciating our partnership over more than a decade in all your previous roles, and now with Bezos Earth Fund. The $3 billion to conserve, restore, and transform the world's food systems is a game changer, and we're really excited to work with you. Thank you also to Ani and WRI for all the work we're doing together, not just on the Land and Carbon Lab and the Global Forest Watch, but on the Food and Land Use Coalition, the New Climate Economy, on forest restoration, on nature crime, and Cities for Forests, and all these other initiatives that are so crucial for our mission. NICFI's mission is to contribute alongside partners, forest countries, governments, corporates, indigenous people, civil society, all the actors needed to reverse tropical deforestation this decade, in line with our climate and nature targets, nothing less. Improved data and transparency is an absolutely fundamental feature to reach that goal, and it is a core part of our strategy. It enables systemic changes that enables all actors that I mentioned to deliver reduced deforestation. 3 of NICFI's most impactful investments over the last decade are Global Forest Watch, the launch of our NICFI satellite program, and Map Biomas, who in each different way contribute to better data for forest, supplementing our extensive investments in supporting national forest monitoring systems. These all play well together, they have different roles, and are important supplements. At the very beginning of NICFI, 15 years ago, when we had a narrower focus on piloting a global RED system, we saw transparency or forest monitoring more or less as a transaction cost, a necessary requirement to enable transactions. We very quickly realized that, of course, it's much bigger than that. It is the strategy in and of itself, and it supports all our current strategic priorities in NICFI. I'll give you a few examples. First and foremost, it supports forest countries' land use policies. It helps countries decide who can do what where. It helps them guide their law enforcement and react quickly to illegal activities. It helps them share benefits and to the ones contributing to protecting forests around the country. And it helps them evaluate what policies work. All of these are critical elements of every success story of reducing deforestation. Brazil showed it in the past decade under the first Lula administration. Monitoring was a critical element in reducing deforestation in the Amazon by 80% in its first presidency. And in the last months, we've seen that the new government is hell-bent on repeating that feat going forward. And they need all our support to achieve it. Today, we're seeing in Indonesia a similar performance. Under President Jokowi, Indonesia has decreased deforestation by 90%, the lowest levels in 20 years. Just yesterday, they released the data for last year, having achieved 104,000 hectares of deforestation in 2021 to 22. This is an untold, globally significant story. And we need to mobilize all our actors, all of us jointly, to support that and sustain those gains going forward. Monitoring, again, was a critical part of their success. Second, better data allows for high-integrity carbon markets. It allows countries to reduce uncertainty estimates of deforestation and degradation data, and it allows for what Andrew referred to, stakeholders to have an open discussion about who contributes and who can benefit in an open way. We are keen to support countries to advance to high-integrity jurisdictional carbon markets, including through the LEAF Coalition. Third, data and transparency empowers indigenous peoples and local communities in different ways. It allows them to exercise their land rights, to stop infringements in their territory. And Global Forest Watch actually is a very interesting tool to use with offline maps and abilities to alert authorities when illegal infringements happen in their territories. Fourth, commodity and financial markets. Companies and investors need consistent and good data to be able to monitor the risks in their supply chains and investor portfolios, and to report on progress towards meet their voluntary goals or emerging regulations. We have seen the success of palm oil, having been an important driver of deforestation in the past, currently close to zero. We hope it stays that way. Now we need to support the soy and beef industries to repeat this success. And data and traceability will be critical in that transition. And of course, as with palm oil, the government policy signals that Brazil, in this case, or other countries will send. Fifth, transparency allows civil society, academia, media, researchers to identify challenges, offer solutions, and keep actors accountable. Critical part of what Global Forest Watch is contributing to. We've seen the forest activists, environmental activists, social activists use better forest data for a long time. We're also working through the Policy Center to promote rainforest journalism, and they're also using these new data and new and innovative ways to increase and improve the journalism about rainforest. Lastly, forest data and transparency enhances international collaboration to combat organized forest crimes. Especially the high-resolution and frequent high-resolution data allow for better investigations and an ability to prosecute illegal actors. We support that work bilaterally with our forest country partners, but also with Interpol and UNODC. For all of these reasons, NICFI is very keen to continue to support and improve data and transparency tools in our combat of tropical deforestation. 2.5 years ago, we launched the NICFI satellite program. We saw a gap in the market, and this program is providing free and universal access of frequent high-resolution data of all tropical forests. The contract lasts until September next year, so we're keen to explore funding opportunities jointly with others to be able to continue to provide such an important public good for the world. A recent evaluation showed that it's already been a huge success, and we firmly believe that this needs to continue going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 7 growing seasons away from 2030. Reversing deforestation will take consistent political will, supported by strong global incentives, carbon markets, commodity markets, governments, philanthropies, all of you. And it will require actionable data that you will contribute to turn data into information that is relevant for decision makers. I know there are a lot of smart people here that understand machine learning and artificial intelligence, stuff that bureaucrats like me have no clue about, except knowing that it's really important. And I hope over the next 3 days, we can have exchanges to understand a little bit better how all of this is going to help reduce deforestation going forward. I'm thrilled to see so many of you show up and the commitment to transparency in the forest and land use sector. I look forward to our engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. And let me say it again. All of this crucial work that needs to be done, which both Andrew and you outlined so eloquently, it could never be done if it wasn't with the support of organizations like the Bezos Earth Fund and like the Norwegian government that has been such a loyal supporter for this work. So I would say let's give them a warm applause for everybody who's contributing to make this work possible. And what I also love, Andreas, is you're not just contributing by the financial means, but also through your push for legislation. You outlined how data and monitoring is not just an implementing part of what we're trying to do, but how it can actually drive, because it shows legislators what can be done, what is possible to anchor into legislation. So making monitoring and data a driver for even more ambitious policies is what you're working towards. And I hope we will continue this collaboration for a very, very long time. Thank you so much. It is also my great pleasure now, last but not least, to introduce Ani Dasgupta, CEO and President of the World Resources Institute. And Ani, who has been at WRI for about 7 years as the Global Director of the Cities Program, became the CEO and President 2 years ago. It's very easy for me to remember because shortly after he hired me, which is about 2 years ago as well, therefore. Ever since then, Ani, you have shown an incredible passion to build on the fantastic work of Andrew, Manish, and others before, to bringing WRI into the next decade. And what I find very striking about you is how you have a deep care for climate, but you combine this with a deep care for nature and people. And so Ani, in his first 2 years, made sure that WRI developed a new strategy that really takes an integrated approach to people, climate, and nature. Because these are such interconnected questions that we will only get it right if we look through this integrated lens. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Ani Dasgupta.
Thank you, Stinja. Good morning. I can't see a lot of you, but thank you everyone for being here. This is a very exciting moment for us. It is, you know, when I came here yesterday to check this place out, I really didn't think we'll fill the space. But thank you, all of you, for showing up. I met some of you who are familiar, a lot of you not. I'm actually personally looking forward to meet each and every one of you. I mean, that was the primary reason we are all here. We're going to listen to many, many fantastic presentations. But the ultimate reason for this summit is to build community. Unique community of all of us working together, as both speakers before me said, that do things that haven't been done before, to bring together best technology, best people on the ground, best thinkers, best funders, best governments, to accelerate change that we need to do. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, everyone who's listening. And I really want to thank Andreas and Andrew for co-hosting this with us. It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure to do this together with you. For me, this is the best kind of meeting. This is going to be 3 days of absolute nerd fest. You know, the best. I mean, seriously. I mean, this is going to be so much fun. I'm personally looking forward to learning so much from all of you. I wanted to share with you why I'm excited. Why is WRI doing this? Why there are so many of us here? At WRI, we believe that for the world to get to a thriving place, as you can imagine, it's not in a thriving place right now, every country on earth needs to go through an economic transition, do things differently, to get to where they are today, to a place where, as Srinja just said, an economy that's good for climate, good for nature, good for people at the same time. No country on earth actually has figured out how to do that. But every country needs to do it. And faster they do it, better it is. As you can imagine, it's harder, this transition, for poorer countries. But this transition requires every piece of the puzzle. That's what we call system change, the systems to change very quickly across the planet. And we think data can play a very important role in two very important ways in this transition to help accelerate this transition. First, data provided in the right packaging, right kind to the right person, the right time. All those things are important. Actually can help build solutions at every level of governance, at the national level, at the cities level, at the businesses. You just had Andrew talk about Sean and A400, how that monitoring is helping us restore millions of hectares in Africa. So it can build better solutions because we need better solutions to accelerate this change. The second thing it can do is even as important, is actually can make people accountable to the promises they've made. Leaders of governments, leaders of businesses, leaders of civil society, that the accountability, we talk about radical transparency, everything we do is publicly available. That transparency pushes people and makes them accountable, and we hope that through this accountability, we also nudge them, push them to be more ambitious, because all of us need to be more ambitious to get to where we need to go. So that's why we are trying to build a practice that does that, that takes data and helps those two things happen. You know, one data point, no pun intended, this meeting actually has the most WRI staff ever gathered for any meeting. We found that out yesterday when we were trying to see who is here. And you know why? It's not because we have the biggest data team or the biggest global forest, because every program in WRI is asking the question, what can data do to drive change fast? That's why everyone across the world, there are more than 100 WRI staff here. And that is the practice we're trying to build. We are a 40-year-old organization, and we are known for our research, how research, evidence can bring change. We're asking the same question of data. Can data accelerate change? And that is why we are all here, and that is why I am so excited to be here. And for us, as you heard from the speakers before, data itself is not the answer. We are asking the question, what decision can data help make? What decision can you make better with data? And you'll hear a lot of this today in the next 3 days. In WRI, we have doubled down on geospatial data, as you heard. You know, for example, aqueduct that has mapped all watershed in Ethiopia. We're trying to do this at the basin level. Our team from Ethiopia is from here, helping to figure out how water can help not only food security, but also energy in the case of Ethiopia. We have an instrument that allows district-level people in Africa figure out how to do renewable energy better, what kind of renewable energy choices they should make through a tool. Of course, we have Global Forest Watch, which will be actually the forest data. I don't know if you've seen the newspaper this morning, there's a launch today. You'll see the tree cover loss. All these would not be possible without actually phenomenally substantial and pioneering investment from NICFI, from Beth. They have made real investment for experimentation. You can't make these things up just by repeating. You have to experiment, and they have done that. And not only these two funders, we have funders from US government, UK government, McGovern Foundation, to Google.org, Moore Foundation. I just want to say from all of us, all 2,000 of us at WRI, thank you. Without your trust and support, we won't be able to do this, and we won't be able to build this community. So thank you very much to all of you. I want to give you an example of what decision-making means when I said data help decision. Global Forest Watch that you will hear a lot about in a few minutes. The bank in Paraguay actually subscribes to Global Forest Watch. They got a alert that one of the farm they'd invested in has a fire, the forest fire there. They alerted the farmer, and the farmer managed to save his forest and the livestock that was in the forest, his farm and the livestock that was in the forest. This is one small example. What happened in this example is, one, the bank figured out monitoring actually has a financial outcome for the bank. And the farmer found out that the bank actually provides a whole different kind of service they didn't know they provided. There are thousands such examples that actually makes things different because of providing data at the right time at the right place. And we will learn a lot about such examples throughout this time. But as you also know, and you'll hear from many people who know much more than I do, actually 1,000 times more, on the revolution that's taking place in technology and data. Rebecca is going to come up and talk about the edges, the boundary conditions. This is why we are here. This is why Land and Carbon Lab was set up, to create a platform to build community, to experiment, to figure out what else could we do? What could we do more with the technological revolution happening? What problems could we solve? This is why we are here, to build new partnerships, strengthen partnerships, but to find out where the boundaries are and what could we do more together. Me personally, I'm really excited about two things. I'm going to be transparent. I'm really excited about discussions on biodiversity loss and what could data do to it. But this is a group of people here who you know who you are. I'm really keen. I'm also very keen. I'm just coming from Brazil, a set of meeting with indigenous people. If we could help indigenous community map indigenous land holding across the globe. Only 50% of indigenous land is mapped today. So there are things like this and many more that is going to be discussed and figured out, and I'm looking forward to that. I just want to point out we can't do any of this without partnership, without doing this together. No organization, we are a relatively large organization of our kind, but it's a tiny organization that needs all of you, and all of you need all of us to actually build. That's why I hope we build new partnership. And how are we going to do this together in the next 3.5 days? I'm going to bring out the best person who can tell us what will happen in the next 300 days, the amazing Crystal Davis. Crystal and her team actually has put this together, all this that you're enjoying now and we'll see in the next 3 days. Crystal has been in WRI for 15 years, and she's kind of done magical things one after another. She started the forest governance program. She built the Land and Carbon Lab. She built the Global Forest Watch. Now she looks after all our landscape work, food, land, water. Please join me to welcome Crystal Davis. Crystal, please.
Thank you, Ani, for that kind introduction. And thank you to Stinja and Andrew and Andreas for inspiring us this morning. It has been a lot of months of planning and preparation to get here, so I am super excited to be here. And now that I am here, I cannot believe that I am standing in front of over 600 people, even more joining online. It has just been amazing to us to see the level of interest and the turnout for this event, so thank you for being here. Now, I assume you are here because you believe, as we do, in the incredible power and potential of geospatial information to help us realize a more sustainable future for our planet. And our agenda over the next 3 days is to figure out how we work together to harness that power towards our shared objectives, the 8 action tracks of the summit. Now, my official job this morning is to introduce you to Land and Carbon Lab. I promise I will do that. And I need my clicker. But before I do that, I'm hoping you will entertain me by going on a quick 5-minute detour through history. Because as it turns out, geospatial information, or to put it more simply, maps, have been shaping human interactions with our planet since the dawn of civilization. And I think this history of maps can teach us some really important lessons that are quite relevant to the work we're trying to do today. So I have 3 history lessons for you. The first lesson is that when it comes to maps, motives matter. Now, it's nice to think that maps are purely objective things, but of course they're not. They reflect the motives of the map maker. The Romans, for example, created this map out of a desire to control their empire. So they focused on administrative boundaries, population centers, road networks. Or during the so-called Age of Exploration in the 16th century, cartographers created maps to fuel a race for commercial expansion, to colonize new parts of the globe. And because most exploring was happening by boat back then, they put a lot of attention to detail on mapping coastlines. Now, can you start to see a trend in motives here? For most of human history, we have been mapping the world's land out of a desire to conquer it, to control it, to commercially exploit it. It's not until very recently that a small number of us, many of you in the room today, have started mapping the world's land out of an entirely different set of motives: to protect it, to manage its finite natural resources more sustainably and more equitably. And I believe that if we can build the next generation of maps that serve a new set of motives, we can use these maps to change the motives of society, to fundamentally change humanity's relationship with land. So my second history lesson is that technology and access to technology, to Andrew's point, really matters too. And we all know in this room that maps are incredibly powerful tools. And throughout human history, the power of maps has been inextricably linked to the evolution of technology. So logic follows: those who have access to technology, those who have the expertise to use it, are the ones who wield the power of maps. And unfortunately, for most of history, this has been a very small and elite group of people. Now, what's exciting to me about today's technology revolution is not only that it is breaking open previously unimaginable possibilities in what we can map and monitor, but it is also allowing the democratization of geospatial information. But even though the technology future we need for a better planet is here, it is not yet evenly distributed. And that's because technology costs money, it's often expensive, and because to be able to use technology effectively, people need expertise, they need capacity that not everyone has or has enough of. And this is a good opportunity for me to thank NICFI for the satellite data program, because it is making commercial satellite imagery from Planet and other sources available to our community free of charge over the past few years. And I can similarly thank our partners at Google, who continue to maintain the Google Earth Engine platform, which is a commercial tool, but they make it freely available to the scientific community. And these are incredibly useful, highly valuable resources, but they're still not enough. We need more investments into the ability of our community to access and to use the technology we need to build the next generation of maps that will serve our motives. So I'm going to draw my final lesson from more recent history, and I would argue that this is the most important lesson of the three. So if you have fallen asleep in history class, now's the time to wake up. And the lesson is that impact takes partnerships. So I showed you this Global Forest Watch map before. It dates all the way back to 2014. But right now, what I want to talk about is how this map has been used to drive impact on the ground over the past 10 years. And I'm going to zoom in on one particular story. This is a photo of Betty Padilla. She is a member of an indigenous community in Peru, one of many communities who have been using Global Forest Watch to help them combat deforestation in their territories. And recently, a group of researchers from Cornell and Rainforest Foundation US published a study in PNAS. It was a randomized control trial, kind of known as the gold standard of impact evaluation. And they found that communities who have been using this technology managed to reduce deforestation by 50% compared to communities that were not, and another 20% in the second year of the study. So when you have this kind of impact, lots of people come asking, what's the secret? How do you do it? How do you turn data into impact? And if I could distill all the learning the Global Forest Watch team has done over the last 10 years, I can boil it down to one key lesson, which is that impact takes partnerships, a lot of them. Because the road from data to impact is much longer than we think. We are 10 years in with GFW, and we have only scratched the surface. It is also a lot more complicated and unpredictable and messy than we think. And you just can't try to navigate this road by yourself. And the impact of GFW has been the work of literally hundreds of partners, research partners, data and technology providers, international partners, local partners across dozens of tropical forest countries. Many of you are here today, so thank you for the amazing work you've done. This is the partnership ecosystem that creates impact from data. So that's the end of my history lesson, although I hope you can keep those 3 insights in mind over the next few days. I'm going to return now to our original question: what is Land and Carbon Lab, and why did we invite you all here today? Land and Carbon Lab is not, I will repeat, is not a new one-size-fits-all global geospatial data platform. I think the world has enough of those on the internet already. Land and Carbon Lab is an incubator for the many fit-for-purpose geospatial solutions that decision makers will need to power sustainable landscapes around the world. And WRI and Bezos Earth Fund came together to create Land and Carbon Lab to catalyze that ecosystem of partnerships that we will need to build those solutions, the maps that serve our motives, and also to deploy those solutions in a way that reaches decision makers and scales our impact. And we convene this summit because you are that partnership. We want to be working with you. So I'm going to provide just 2 examples of how the work of Land and Carbon Lab, how these partnerships are starting to evolve just 2 years in. And these examples aren't comprehensive of everything we are currently doing or could possibly be doing with respect to the 8 action tracks of the summit, but consider it your preliminary introduction. So I'm going to start with the story of landscape restoration. Land and Carbon Lab is supporting the mission of AFR 100. Over 30 African countries have made ambitious restoration targets. A lot of money has been pledged as well. But you all probably know better than anyone that it's really hard to unlock even committed finance if you can't measure your results. And while we've been watching trees disappearing in near real time on Global Forest Watch for a decade now, we still don't have a similarly scalable, cost-effective, and open solution for monitoring trees growing back in the landscape, let alone the carbon they are slowly sequestering as they grow. So Land and Carbon Lab has been working with scientists to try to tackle this problem. The good news is technology is getting better every day, and just recently we were able to launch this new tropical tree cover data set that Andrew referenced. It uses artificial intelligence, 10-meter resolution satellite imagery from Sentinel to detect individual trees growing across any kind of landscape, forested or not. And you can see this data right now on Global Forest Watch. It covers the entire tropics for 2020. And the next step for us is to operationalize this for annual monitoring and expand it to the world. But how do you take these global data sets living on global platforms and transform them into practical monitoring solutions that work for local restoration implementers on the ground? And to figure this out, we have been working with TerraFund for AFR 100 and their many partners who are working to bring technical assistance and financing to literally thousands of restoration entrepreneurs across the continent. This is a photo of a restoration landscape in Malawi. It's called the Eureka Project. And as you can see in the photo, people are busting out tape measures. They are measuring trees, trying to understand the carbon that they store. Meanwhile, Land and Carbon Lab is working with Michigan State University to measure these exact same trees from space. And when we take all this data together, we can create models that correlate space data with ground data to extrapolate a carbon baseline for this entire landscape without having to go measure every single individual tree on the ground. And as we start pulling in data from hundreds, eventually thousands of restoration projects across Africa, now you're moving towards a scalable model that can provide a cost-effective monitoring solution for AFR 100 partners on the ground. And as we're building all this data, it's getting pulled into the TerraMatch tool so that any project developer can go online, create a baseline, create a monitoring report, and if you're a funder, you can go online and see these same reports and make your investment decisions accordingly. So for my last example, as Andrew mentioned, you can't do restoration, you can't do conservation unless you radically transform food systems, because somehow we have to feed 10 billion people by 2050, while also halting the expansion of agriculture into natural ecosystems and radically cutting greenhouse gas emissions from the sector. And again, we have a huge monitoring problem, because right now, no one is monitoring the world's agricultural lands with enough spatial and temporal resolution to be useful for your everyday decision maker. So last year, Land and Carbon Lab worked with the GLAD Lab at University of Maryland to produce the first ever high-resolution maps of global cropland change in the 21st century. It's incredible data. You can go online to Land and Carbon Lab's website to find it right now. As you can see across the tropics, just a massive expansion of cropland over the past 20 years. But there are places in the world where we are losing cropland, like you can see in China, often due to urbanization. And because this is 30-meter resolution data, we can zoom in anywhere in the world and see these trends unfold over time. But this is just the very beginning of our work on agricultural monitoring. We are bringing many more research partners to the table, and these partners are working to segment this cropland data for individual crop types and their yields, to expand the monitoring system beyond crops to the world's grazing and pasture lands, and finally to layer on spatially explicit monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions from the sector. But as I think everyone has emphasized already this morning, data is important. We need better data. But creating that data is just the first mile in the marathon that we are running towards impact. And we should always be asking ourselves, who needs this data? What do they need it for? And how can we be working with them to figure out what solutions they need? So for starters, companies needed this data yesterday because they are setting their net zero targets. They are facing regulation for conversion-free commodities. So Land and Carbon Lab is working with leading companies in this space, with the major standard-setting initiatives in the space, to figure out how our data can feed into a harmonized set of GHG and land reporting metrics that can work for any company, no matter where they are in their traceability journey. And then, of course, the next step is to plug these metrics in to the tools companies are already using to monitor and report in their supply chains, like Global Forest Watch Pro. So those are two examples that I have for you. Hopefully, it helps illustrate what Land and Carbon Lab is and aspires to be, the work we're starting to do, and what is possible with cutting-edge innovation and partnership. And over the next 3 days, as you are attending various sessions and talking to each other, I hope you can start to think about, where do I fit into this partnership ecosystem? How can I be working with Land and Carbon Lab and others in this room to harness technology, to build the maps we need to serve our motives, and to deploy these maps to inform the decisions that matter, the decisions that will help us create impact across these 8 action tracks of the summit. We have a very full program for you over the next 3 days. There are almost 50 parallel sessions for you to choose from. I hope you have all figured out how to use Swap Card on your phone, because that is going to be your resource to help you make informed choices about which session to show up to. But as Ani pointed out, the main goal of this summit is to have you talking to each other and learning from each other. So we've intentionally tried to design the program to be highly interactive. And I really encourage you all to show up to the marketplace sessions that we have scheduled each afternoon. This is your opportunity for semi-structured networking. There will be spotlight talks, there will be exhibits, there will be coffee, there will be everything you need to meet people and have good conversations. So with that, I'm going to turn to the next part of our agenda and my notes. We have another set of speakers coming up, which I am very honored to be able to introduce. And these speakers will be adding even more life and more color to the themes that I've introduced this morning. So to start, I would like to introduce Astrid Schomacher. Astrid is the Director of Green Diplomacy and Multilateralism at the European Commission's Director General for Environment. And we are honored to have Astrid here to welcome us to Brussels officially and help us think about these topics in the context of European policy. So welcome, Astrid, to the stage.
Thank you, and good morning. Of course, you can't see a thing, but congratulations to the organizers. A meeting in Brussels, and it's been taking 1 hour until a bureaucrat takes the floor. I think that already is a feat. So let me now, on behalf of the European Commission, say it's such a pleasure to welcome the Land and Carbon Summit to Brussels, and thanks for choosing Brussels as the home of the European Green Deal as its location. As many of you will know, the European Green Deal has set out to tackle the planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution in a new way, in a systemic way. And it's a crisis, by the way, that costs the economy billions of dollars every year. Let's bear this in mind. So we want to do this differently, a systemic approach, a new economic model, the circular economy, but more than anything, policy coherence. when we're talking that, what we're calling that the do no harm principle of the Green Deal. And indeed, the Green Deal is quite clear about the fact how biodiversity loss, land degradation, climate change all interact with each other, mutually exacerbate each other, and how we cannot tackle one of them successfully without also tackling the other. And how do we do that? Well, I'm not here by accident. It's data. It's data and information that underpins policies that we need. And forests, if anything, exemplify the interactions that I've just mentioned. We know that more biodiverse forests are also more resilient. They're more productive and in a way more multifunctional. Preserving healthy forests is important for the millions of people that depend on them, billions actually, for their livelihoods. It's therefore important in terms of productivity, but also in terms of the ecosystem services, such as climate mitigation, adaptation, but of course also for our own health and well-being. The IPCC has been very clear in its recent 6 assessment report synthesis that halting deforestation and restoring ecosystems is, after the rapid deployment of wind and solar energy, the most efficient way of bringing CO2 emissions down. Now in Europe, we don't have deforestation, properly speaking, at this point of our history. We've done it before, but now this is not what we're grappling with, but we are confronted with the issue of forest degradation, with climate change and management practices that are affecting biodiversity and our carbon sinks and stocks. Now, to reach our climate objectives, and I think many of you may be familiar with them, climate neutrality by 2050 and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030 compared to 1990, we have rolled out ambitious climate and energy policies, covering about everything from energy efficiency and new renewable targets, and of course our brand new carbon border adjustment mechanism, amongst others. But we absolutely also need to increase our carbon sinks. And the trend in Europe at the moment is negative. We're losing carbon sinks in Europe. And it's against this background that our land use change and forestry, LULUCF, complicated name, regulation establishes a target of minus 310 million tons of CO2 per year by 2030. So reversing this trend, what does it take? Data, because we need to know what we're doing. We need to restore our carbon-rich ecosystems like forests, which is also why the hotly debated nature restoration law is critically important, not only for us to meet the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but also to reach our climate targets. And in fact, it will not be enough. So within a few weeks, the European Commission will propose a new soil law, which will allow us to assess the health of soils and offer a range of support measures to bring them back to healthy condition. And this will be followed, still before the summer, I believe, with a new forest monitoring law. You get the drift, what is at the background of all this legislation? Data. So with this sort of fairly ambitious domestic action in place, what is new about the Green Deal is that, however, we're also looking beyond our borders, and we are cognizant of the fact that our consumption has a huge impact on the global environment, on the environment in third countries. And again, our impact on forests constitutes probably the clearest example. According to the FAO, 90% of global deforestation is driven by agricultural expansion. And the EU is an important consumer of these commodities. This is what is behind our deforestation regulation, which will enter into force this week. So it's a regulation which aims to ensure that the EU consumption on a series of commodities, soy, palm oil, rubber, coffee, cocoa, beef, no, forget one. What I forgot? Palm oil, have I mentioned? Anyway, 7 commodities, does not drive further deforestation. And the operators placing these commodities on our markets, they will have to carry out due diligence to ensure that what they place on our market does not come from land deforested after 31st December 31. Now for all of this, It goes without saying, but I've already said it 4 times. Accurate monitoring and geospatial data availability are paramount. And the discussions over the next few days will be so important for us to understand what is possible, to link data with policy and underpin policy with data that we believe will guarantee the success of the Green Deal. So let me then just conclude by saying thank you to WRI, the Basis Fund, and NICFI. Thank you for providing this space to think outside the box, as somebody has been saying, but also to think big, to understand what is possible, and to understand where we need to focus action. We think the deforestation regulation is just a first step. We believe it will change markets, and financial institutions will follow. Or perhaps it will be the other way around. The financial institutions will change their practices and markets will follow. I'm never quite sure about that. But all we know is it will bring change, and it will be change for the better. Thank you very much for being here in Brussels, and I wish you a wonderful 3 days.
Thank you, Astrid. And you point out why we decided to hold this summit here in Brussels, because policy and regulation is creating so much of the demand for the data and monitoring we're producing, and having that tight link between policy and data is critical to our success. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the same stage, I think, tomorrow morning to talk more about the EU deforestation regulation. That's going to be a great conversation. So I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. She is a personal hero of mine in my career. She has been a leader in geospatial technology, a pioneer in how that technology is being applied for good, and a longtime partner of WRI in this space who is constantly, relentlessly pushing us to keep our focus on impact. So it is my pleasure to introduce to the stage Rebecca Moore, who is the director for Google Earth.
Wow. I will try to live up to that, Crystal. Hello, everyone. I have been invited to speak about the geospatial revolution. And at first I thought it was a little too bold, like I would never have created that title. But as I reflected on it, there really has been a geospatial revolution over the last 10 plus years. And also, as I thought about it, pretty much every single person that has spoken before me, and I think many of you in this room, are also revolutionaries. I mean, isn't Astrid a revolutionary with policy? And Andreas and Nikvi, you've been revolutionary in how you've stretched to provide this amazing commercial planet data and Airbus data for free to civil society and academics. Ani and Crystal are revolutionaries. Andrew, we know, is a revolutionary. So I feel in good company. All right. So we need to be revolutionaries, because this is, the view from space, right? We're looking at Mato Grosso over the last almost 40 years. And you can see the Amazon, dramatically disappearing. So we cannot do what we've always done before unless we want to have the same outcome, which I believe we do not. We're also getting these warnings now from nature that we're hitting these tipping points. The Amazon, for the first time, actually emitted more carbon than it sequestered in 2021, at least for certain regions. So that's a wake-up call. But let's talk about the revolution. So I really think the geospatial revolution in this field started when USGS and NASA made Landsat free. This is like 2008, 2009. And this incredible explosion of Earth observation data, remote sensing data from space, with the launch of the Sentinels. We've got things like LiDAR from space, so many different amazing types of observation of the planet, not just imagery, but scientific, other types of scientific measurement, are incredible. But the problem is, you know, if you're a researcher or, you know, a practitioner, how are you supposed to deal with the terabytes or petabytes of data that are now being generated? And so that was kind of the impetus for us at Google. Scientists came to us and said, look, we cannot monitor deforestation in the Amazon. It takes too much data. It takes weeks and weeks of analysis, and by the time we have any results, they're almost irrelevant. Could you help us, Google? That led us to introduce what was the first cloud-native planetary scale geospatial analytics, data and analytics platform that we called Earth Engine. And the paradigm shift is to move the data to the cloud, to move your analysis to the cloud, and it's all co-located, so it's extremely efficient and timely. Matt Hansen's my hero because, you know, we were trying to get scientists to kick the tires of this thing that we had invented, and most people were like, I don't know about this cloud thing. And Matt decided to try it out, and he harnessed the power of our engine to create, many of you probably are familiar with this, the first high-resolution map of global forest cover and change. That has been, you know, revolutionary. And the thing that I learned from Matt, that he said, what's remarkable about this data product is it's globally consistent and it's locally relevant. For the first time, there's a forest map that you can make decisions on the basis of, and you have the same quality of data everywhere. It was a huge amount of computation, but because we ran it on 10,000 computers in parallel, we had the results in a few days, whereas on a single computer would have taken 15 years to create Matt's map. Crystal showed a version of this. This is another important thing about data in the cloud. The data is continuously coming into our data centers, updating like every 10 or 15 minutes. And so that unlocks the ability to do very time-sensitive types of analysis anywhere and everywhere. And this has unlocked the ability to do this type of alerting, a near real-time alerting of deforestation in the Amazon and elsewhere. NICFI, I really want to give a shout out to Andreas and the team there because, you know, Planet has then brought the resolution of data down to 3 to 5 meters from 10 meters or 30 meters of the publicly available data. And that we've hosted that all on Earth Engine, made it available for free through the program, and there have been excellent use cases already. Andreas, have to share with you, the usage is just skyrocketing all around the world. And for example, Ghana is using it for you know, detecting illegal gold mining. They have just recently gotten approval for their jurisdictional RED Plus payments for the reduction of the avoided deforestation that they can account for. EPAM Amazonia is doing a really interesting project that I think is relevant for the EUDR in the sense that they are monitoring, using Planet NICFI data, the performance of rural landowners who have certain requirements in the Amazon of what they are and are not allowed to do. And based on this analysis, their payments for ecosystem services will be adjusted. This is, in a smaller scale, an example of what I think EUDR is trying to accomplish. And a decade ago, Earth observation data was not being used in this way. It was not being used for this type of compliance because it wasn't high resolution, globally consistent, locally relevant, everywhere and timely. But now it is. FAO has done amazing work. They've been a fantastic partner. And I agree with Crystal and Andrew, everyone's comments about partnerships. For us, you know, I am a nerd, I admit it, I confess, but technology, even from my point of view, is just bits and bytes. It's when you put it in the hands of people who know what to do with it that change happens. And so FAO has been a great partner. They've been using Earth Engine all over the world. More than 180 countries are using technology they've built for environmental monitoring. They have a system called CEPL. This is a little bit of nerding out. We're looking at the temporal cadence of 2 pixels in the Congo Basin. One shows deforestation, the other shows degradation. And doing pixel level analysis in and of itself is not a radical revolution. But the fact that you could do this on quadrillions of pixels at once, all over the planet, is what is unlocking new capabilities. I think I need to accelerate a bit. So we talked a lot about deforestation and degradation, but restoration is a really critical opportunity for us. And a scientific group did a groundbreaking study published in Science, analyzing every hectare on the planet and where there was the greatest potential for restoration. And that's now turned into an operational platform called Restore. They've got more than 100,000 projects on the ground that they are supporting with high-resolution analytics and information and co-benefits of these projects like carbon and biodiversity positive impacts. We talked a bit earlier about commodities and supply chain. The private sector is making all these commitments. They need our help, and we've got a number of them now using Earth Engine and the ability to do geospatial mashups, if you like, of all kinds of relevant data and fusing that together to determine characteristics of the supply chain. For example, palm oil sourcing. Unilever is using it in this way. Almost done here. I have to speak about AI. You've heard about this from a couple of other folks. We've now seen sort of classical remote sensing scientists are beginning to embrace the AI revolution. And I do think that's where we're going to see the most breakthroughs, not just from AI folks who don't know remote sensing and not just from remote sensing folks, but working together. So Carlos Souza, who was one of the instigators of Earth Engine, is now using AI to detect roads in the Brazilian Amazon using AI. You can see here the beginning of, he's doing this over time, the beginning of roads forming. You can see them extending and then extending further. This is very important information to have because it's often difficult to see this by visual inspection. A project that we've done with WRI, very close partnership with WRI, is called Dynamic World. You're going to hear more about that over the next couple of days, but it is a land cover model that is near real time. It is one of the amazing things about being near real time as opposed to an annual land cover product is you can detect seasonal variation, you can detect events. So if you look at those animations, you're seeing a snowstorm that hit Boston or the flooding of the Okavango Delta or a fire, the Caldor fire in California. These sorts of things can be detected by Dynamic World. We're just at the start of really applying AI for land cover mapping. So keep your eye on that space. Okay, sorry, I had the wrong slide up. Now you're seeing what I'm talking about. All right, now you can see what's happening in these different, all right. All right, my last point here, back to equity and indigenous people, local communities. We can't have a revolution without the people that are on the front lines giving their lives, in many cases, to defend their territory. And I think it's very important. Part of the effort our team has always invested has been how can we bring this technology to those communities. And we're seeing, for example, take a look at this territory of the Uru Wow Wow as this flies in to the region in the north. You can literally see how the deforestation is going right up to their border and then stopping. That's because they're defending it, again, sometimes with their lives. So it's really critical, I think, as we go forward, we do everything we can to elevate, lift, include those communities. All right. So you said you wanted a revolution. Well, we all want to change the world, right? As I was thinking about this, I was like, there's that Beatles song, right? So welcome to the revolution.
Thank you, Rebecca. You had no problem living up to the hype. And that was a perfect segue to our next presentation, because a lot of what Rebecca focused on was not just how we pioneer new technology, but how we get that technology into the hands of people who can use it to make a difference. And our next two speakers are doing exactly that. So I'm very excited to introduce Nixon Andy, who is an indigenous ICOFON leader from the community of Sinangowe in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and also Nicolas Mainville, who leads the Land Defense Program for Amazon Frontlines, also based in Ecuador. And do you remember the road from data to impact that I talked about earlier that was very squiggly and difficult? They are navigating that road right now and are here to share their experiences with us. And they will be presenting in Spanish, so if you all can use your swap card platform and your personal headsets to access translation, you'll be able to hear their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Buenos dias a todos. I'm just going to leave you maybe a minute just to adjust the translation. I'm going to switch to Spanish. Buenos días a todos, a todas. Gracias por la invitación. Es un gran honor de estar aquí hoy día. Y para esa gran aventura que vamos a tener con ustedes por 10 minutos, les vamos a llevar en la selva. Entonces, por eso lo hacemos en español. Mi compañero y yo queremos contarles una historia de esperanza, una historia que se va desarrollando en la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Les llevamos a un territorio, a los perimontes de los Andes, en la parte oeste de la Amazonía, donde por los 7 últimos años se ha desarrollado una lucha en contra de la deforestación y del avance de la minería legal y ilegal. Entonces, para contar la historia, quiero introducir a mi compañero Nixon Andy. Nixon es el coordinador de su guardia indígena en su comunidad y nos va a contar cómo va avanzando con la Alianza Seibo, una coalición de 4 nacionalidades indígenas, avanzando para defender su territorio. Nixon.
Hola. Gracias a todos por la invitación también. Es un gran honor para mí estar acá y poder compartir toda la importancia para nosotros como el territorio es mucha vida. Nuestros abuelos nos han dejado esa herencia y ahora nosotros como jóvenes desde la comunidad nos preocupan mucho las amenazas que existen. El extractivismo ha estado avanzando mucho, la minería, el petróleo, la tala de bosque ha estado avanzando en nuestros territorios y nosotros desde las comunidades nos hemos organizado para poder controlar eso, para poder que no avance más y no destruyan nuestra vida, nuestro alimento, nuestras medicinas, porque nosotros tiene mucha importancia en el territorio. Hay mucha sabiduría, mucho conocimiento que nosotros como pueblos entendemos la importancia que existe. Hemos creado una guardia indígena en la comunidad para controlar todos estos daños, monitorear, caminar días y días en el campo, porque la tecnología también ha llegado a nuestras comunidades, nos ha ayudado mucho, ha sido una herramienta muy importante para tener registrado lo que está avanzando todas las amenazas. En este caso, hemos tenido mucha información de minería, de invasión, y así nosotros hemos podido con estas evidencias mostrar a las personas de afuera, porque para nosotros en las comunidades es mucho la palabra, vale mucho la palabra, pero en el mundo, como decimos, de afuera, no creen la palabra. Entonces, esta herramienta nos ha ayudado a tener y así poder denunciar lo que está avanzando. Gracias, Nick, también. Nicolás ha sido una persona que ha estado siempre al lado de nosotros, luchando, ha conocido mucho nuestro territorio y le paso para que pueda también explicar un poco. Nicolás, gracias.
Gracias, Nixon. Lo que ha pasado en Sinangué es algo histórico. La comunidad ha logrado organizarse con su guardia para documentar con un gran rango de tecnología. No solo los datos geoespaciales, pero también con los drones, cámara trampa, GPS, fueron volando drones para justo detectar lo que estaba pasando de actividades ilegales. Y con un paquete de información bastante fuerte han logrado convencer a 3 niveles de jueces en Ecuador sobre el daño que estaba pasando con la minería. Frenaron un boom minero en 2018 como comunidad pequeña, utilizando la tecnología, utilizando los datos, demostrando a los jueces a nivel regional, provincial y hasta la Corte Constitucional que se había violado su derecho a la consulta previa, libre e informada, y que se había violado también los derechos a la naturaleza, que son reconocidos en Ecuador. Entonces, el trabajo de campo, la vigilancia que ha hecho la Guardia de Sinangué, no solo ha permitido frenar un boom minero, pero también ha inspirado ahora a otras comunidades, porque la Corte Constitucional le dio razón a Sinangué. Y ahora hay una jurisprudencia a nivel nacional que permite a otros pueblos indígenas, utilizando justo el caso de Sinangué para defender sus territorios y frenar otras amenazas muy similares, como pueden ver en la pantalla. Entonces, lo que es el éxito de Sinangué es un éxito de un gran trabajo de la comunidad para unirse, para tener estrategias de defensa territorial que es creíble y que utiliza la tecnología. Y la tecnología ha sido una herramienta y nada más que eso. No es el fin. La tecnología, los datos, lo que han sacado del campo ha permitido a convencer a los jueces. Pero lo que nosotros vemos como Amazon Frontlines, como organizaciones que trabajamos en el campo, la solución aquí es de saber cómo utilizar la tecnología, ¿sí? Hablamos mucho de cómo aterrizar los datos, cómo asegurar que sirven a la gente. Entonces, lo que nos damos cuenta es que apoyar a las comunidades con tecnología sí, es bueno, es fuerte y es importante y podemos hacerlo mejor. Pero también hay que pensar, estrategias de defensa territorial significa también proceso de toma de decisión, gobernanza, fuerza dentro de las comunidades. Y esas comunidades son miles que pueden proteger el bosque. Sabemos la fuerza de los pueblos indígenas para proteger sus territorios, pero ahora hay que pensar de manera diferente cómo lograr apoyar a esas comunidades, ¿sí? Entonces, si queremos que los pueblos indígenas defiendan la selva como queremos, hay que desaprender un poco, no caer en las mismas trampas de colonización como antes. Ellos son los dueños, ellos toman sus decisiones, ellos tienen sus procesos de toma de decisión. Entonces hay que cambiar nuestra manera de trabajar con pueblos indígenas, ¿sí? Y aceptar los ritmos que son diferentes. Vemos la deforestación avanzando tan rápido, pero las tomas de decisiones en las comunidades son muy lentas a veces y hay que respetar eso. Entonces es un llamado también a la atención de todos nosotros como comunidad. ¿Cómo podemos enfrentar la deforestación respetando a los pueblos indígenas? Se hace en el campo, se hace caminando con ellos, ¿sí? Y se hace entendiendo qué es el riesgo de enfrentar esa deforestación. ¿Qué significa para un coordinador de guardia de enfrentar mineros ilegales? ¿Cuál es el riesgo para sus vidas y cómo se toman las decisiones a largo plazo? Eso ha sido nuestra gran aventura juntos y ahora lo vemos con otras comunidades al nivel de la Amazonía ecuatoriana y ojalá esa historia les pueda inspirar. Con mucho gusto de seguir hablándolo en la próxima sesión que tenemos, mañana a las 11 creo, podemos conversarlo. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you so much, Nicolas and Nixon. It's a great reminder that data and technology are an important input, but it is just one piece of a much more complicated puzzle when we're trying to protect and conserve indigenous territories or other lands. So we're in the final stretch. I have one more presentation for you. It's an exciting one. I think many of you know that in the beginning of every year, for the past 9 years in a row, Global Forest Watch and University of Maryland come together to release new data and analysis about the previous year's forest loss trends. And today is the day. The data was actually just released online an hour before you sat down this morning. So we're excited to share it with you. Before I hand over the mic, I want to make one quick point about what goes on behind the scenes to operationalize a data product like this. Because it's one thing to create a map. It is another thing entirely to keep that map updated reliably, consistently, year on year, to offer it as a global public good and a monitoring service to the world. There's a lot of work that goes into it, so a big thank you to University of Maryland team, Global Forest Watch team, NICFI, and our other donors who allow us to maintain this service as a global public good that so many people have come to rely on. So with that, I would like to invite Michaela Weiss, who is the director of Global Forest Watch, as well as Matt Hansen, who is professor and co-director of the Global Land Analysis and Discovery Lab at University of Maryland. Welcome to the stage.
Well, I hope everyone is still awake and on the edge of your seats. So as Crystal mentioned, just a couple of hours ago, we released the findings of the 2022 tree cover loss data produced by Matt Hansen's team at the University of Maryland. So this data is critical for understanding what is happening in the world's forests, and it is such a privilege to be sharing that data today with all of you as some of the best and brightest minds in land monitoring and a global community really committed to turning data into action. So let's take a look at what happened to the world's forests in 2022. So in 2022, the world saw 4.1 million hectares of tropical primary forest loss, which is an area the size of Switzerland and the equivalent to losing 11 football pitches worth of forest every minute for the entire year. That forest loss also resulted in 2.7 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions, equivalent to the annual fossil fuel emissions of India. And we've seen a 10% increase in primary forest loss between 2021 and 2022, and since the turn of the century, a consistent hemorrhaging of some of the world's most important forested ecosystems. Now, this data is global, but we're focusing here mostly on the tropics because that is where the vast majority of deforestation or human-caused permanent land use change is happening. When we look at deforestation on the global level, we'll see that we are not on track to end deforestation by 2030, which is something that the heads of state of 145 countries promised to as part of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration in 2021. Instead, we saw an increase in deforestation between 2021 and 2022, and generally a mismatch between what countries promised and what they are implementing. If we drill down to the country level, that can give us a better sense of where we should be paying special attention. So returning again to focus on tropical forests, Brazil made up had the vast majority of primary forest loss in the tropics, making up 43% of the total. That's not necessarily a surprise, since Brazil has the most primary forest to begin with, but that country saw a 15% increase in its rate of forest loss between 2021 and 2022, reaching some of the highest levels since the early 2000s. Just behind Brazil was the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which has seen a consistently high rate of forest loss over the past several years. And digging into the trends, the increases and decreases that we see in primary forest loss can also give us a sense of where things are going well or not as well. So these next couple of graphs focus on the change in the 3-year moving average of this data. And we see that Ghana has had the biggest increase in primary forest loss over the past several years, which is especially concerning given the very small amount of primary forest remaining in the country. We also saw a big increase in Bolivia, which reached record levels of forest loss in 2022. That country is now 3rd for the most primary forest loss in the tropics, just behind the Democratic Republic of Congo. And on the positive side, Indonesia has reduced its rate of primary forest loss more than any other country, and we've also seen consistent declines in Malaysia and other countries. And with that, I'll pass it over to Matt to share some examples from the data.
Thanks, Michaela. Thank everyone for being here. It's a really nice group, a lot of familiar faces. I want to start by talking at the gross level, just tree cover loss and reflections on the product itself. Our team at GLAD on this operational product, I like the emphasis that Crystal put on making a product that's timely, consistent, and repeated over time lets us track the dynamics and whether we're improving or not. Peter Potapov and Svetlana Turbanova are our team who lead this work, and Peter's here. They have a young family. I think that Svetlana has to be with their boy, but I want to acknowledge the excellent work, and a lot of you know Peter and Svetlana, who are responsible for doing this. And I'll highlight other members of our team as I go through this presentation. But even here, this color, you can see the warm tones in Africa, and some of that list, you saw Angola, other African countries in West Africa. These oranges and reds represent increasing loss. So even at this core scale, you can see dynamics that are of concern. And I'm going to zoom in and just show, pseudo-full resolution. In this color bar, you can see this is the road in the center of this between Sinop and Santarém, connecting the soybean heartland of Mato Grosso to the Amazon, but also the opening in the between those places for pasture, and these red colors representing newer openings in more recent times, and we call it the Bolsonaro effect or what have you. But since 2013, a lot of backsliding in Brazil. But anyway, we are allowed to look at these dynamics. Picking a country scale to tell a story and to reflect, also bringing in other themes. This is Bezos Earth Fund themes around tree height, cropland, built-up area, trying to do IPCC or more synoptic land cover land use dynamics. And Michaela just mentioning that Bolivia is 3rd now. In the last couple of years, Bolivia's been 3rd in primary deforestation. It's twice the size of Spain. 40% of its area is primary humid tropical forest, and it is now 3rd on an annual basis, 4th in gross loss over 20 years. Who knew that? How many people are keeping up with Bolivia? And I think that's the value of these data. Even Bolivians we talk to are not fully aware of the scale of the issue, and here's the loss on an annual basis. There's a lot of dynamics in this loss. We have the opening of the Amazon forest with logging and fire. We are tracking fire. This pink color is from Sasha Tukavina. All of our tree cover loss now is differentiated between forest loss due to fire and other factors, and we hope to further attribute causal dynamics at a per pixel scale. Where we see a lot of forest loss due to fire increasing over time in Bolivia as they open up forests. We also are charting to track commodities. So this green color represents soybean, which is made by Xiaopeng Song, tracking Western Hemisphere commodity soybean evolution. And we're seeing, like in Brazil, 10 million additional hectares in the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of that at the expense of natural ecosystems, particularly in the Cerrado. This is a hotspot of direct conversion of forest to soybean, Bolivia. And we can just zoom in and look at the scale of the dynamics up close. It's interesting, Bolivia it's changed its name officially to Plurinacional to emphasize that it's a majority indigenous country, but this dynamic that we see in the Chiquitano forest of eastern Santa Cruz province, non-indigenous, colonized landscapes and large-scale mechanized ag, there's a disconnect there, and again, it's something that's not well documented on the drivers. Finally, I want to show a new product that's going to kind of bridge the gap over the course of years. We have Amy Pickens, also of our team here, is producing an alert, and this is just changed in this year. So these red tones and then these pixels being filled up for the dynamic of vegetation disturbance are through like a week ago. And so as we move forward, we'll be able to track in near real time what's going on in different countries. And what we see in this animation, some large-scale pastures, some smaller-scale expansion of Mennonite colonies, either for probably dominantly for pasture or soy. But regarding the EU policy, you can imagine we are dating the date of disturbance all the way through to see if it eventually becomes a commodity that is of interest to the policy. And that's what you need to kind of correlate a start-end date of the implementation of, let's say, banning a commodities import or not. Ghana, I'm just going to go through this real quickly. Ghana's a sad story. These forest reserves that you see in the southwest of the country, it's the beginning of the Upper Ghanaian rainforest zone. And these patches of forest reserve have been in the satellite record for the entire time. And in the last few years, we've seen a dramatic increase in their clearing. So in West Africa, the only forest left is protected. And we see dramatic increases in forest encroachment here. Ghana getting up to around 15% forest loss overall in the time series. And this is another picture of Amy's alert where we see mining in the Oda Forest Reserve. And this is well known, the illegal logging, illegal mining in these forest reserves. And again, there should be a zero deforestation policy for all of West Africa because the only thing left are small fragments in protected areas, and even those are coming under the pressures of land use change. Last one, good news, Malaysia, but I would temper that a little bit because this is the scale of change. If I turn off all of the non-primary forest loss, you see this number. Malaysia is fifth overall in total primary forest loss in our time series. And I would argue that when you look at the dynamic, this pulse, like a rush to land use, would inevitably slow because all of the easily accessible, most profitable lands have already been converted, and now you have to go deeper into Borneo, into more unfriendly terrain to do land use development. And so eventually, due to the resource being exhausted and or less easily converted, you're going to slow down. And that's just kind of a fact of the land use transition, no matter where you are. So it could be business as usual, it could be policy, but I think we have to check the dynamic itself. That's all I got, just 3 vignettes. But again, thanks to Peter and Svetlana for their work, and I'll give it back to Michaela, or keep going.
Yep. Great. So you can read more of our full analysis on the Global Forest Review. You can also view the data on Global Forest Watch and the University of Maryland's portal. And we also have an event this afternoon at 3:15 in this same room on what happened to the world's forests in 2022. We'll talk a little bit more about the data findings, and we'll also have a discussion about what this means in the context of fighting tropical deforestation. So once again, just a privilege to be presenting this data with so many change makers here in the room today, and really looking forward to the conversations that this data sparks over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Nat. So that is a wrap. Welcome to Land and Carbon Lab's 2023 Summit. We are running about 15 minutes late, and we are going to give that 15 minutes back to you because I'm sure you're itching for some coffee and some conversation. I'm just going to run through a small list of housekeeping items. So coffee and all the food you will be served over the next 3 days is going to be in the Grand Auditorium, which is to my right, to your left. There's also self-service coffee and water throughout the venue. And next to the registration, there is a quiet space, and also upstairs on the roof deck, if you need even more quiet space and place for quiet conversations, you can find that. We have a prayer room and a maternity room. It is R5. Please knock before entering. There is no smoking in the venue, so please do that outside or on the roof deck. And then again, one more pitch for Swap Card. We have so much content. It will help you navigate and make decisions and make the most of this experience. And we are also going to be asking you via Swap Card at the end of each day to share a top reflection or insight. I really encourage you all to do so. It'll be super helpful for us. And if you have any questions or any needs at all, please just go to the registration desk and we can get you taken care of. So coffee over here, you've got 30 minutes. Please then try to come to the first set of parallel sessions, what will look like 15 minutes late according to the program. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. Looking forward to interacting with you all.